Today we have Andrew Smith, who is the co-founder of the Savory Fund, a private equity fund that specializes in partnering with restaurant concepts to deliver necessary capital, industry knowledge, and operational prowess to facilitate growth into multi-unit brands. Some of these brands include Swig Drinks, R&R BBQ, and the Crack Shack. Prior to Savory, Andrew co-founded Four Foods Group, a multi-brand restaurant operations and investment company that built and operated over 170 restaurants across the U.S. Andrew has raised over $520 million in funding, generated over $1.7 billion in sales, and created over 30,000 jobs, which remains his number one focus. So with that, welcome in, Andrew.
Thank you. It sounds like it's easy, but that was a lot of work, man. Holy cow.
I could imagine.
So much work.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear your story. And again, appreciate you being here. We mentioned we had Nicole with Swig on, which was fantastic. And so to come full circle to have you on, it means a lot. So I'm excited. First thing I typically ask my guests, Andrew, is to talk a little bit about your upbringing. So early, childhood or high school or kind of formative years, that couple experiences that may have shaped you into who you are today.
Well, we're here in the beautiful state of Utah now, but I was born in the city of Chicago. So born on the North Shore in Evanston, a beautiful Evanston. If you ever get to go to Chicago, which people think that if they go to Chicago, they're going to get shot or something. It's really not that dangerous.
Got it.
There are parts that are dangerous, but I grew up in the North Shore, and then we went out to a suburb called Elgin when I was a toddler. But I grew up in Chicago, wonderful place to grow up. My father was one of the deans at Northwestern Dental, and had a practice right there on Michigan Avenue. And so always looked at my dad as kind of the hero in my life, like many do. And I thought maybe I'll go into medical something, because my older brother went into medical as well, became a dentist as well. My older sister was thinking about going and being a hygienist. And then my other sister that's right above me, so there's 5 kids in my family, right above me, she went into business school or business classes, and then she went and got an MBA. And I was like, wow, she's kind of the black sheep here because she's going into business. But as I thought about the medical arena and I kind of watched what my dad did, I respected it, but I just thought, number one, I can't see blood. I mean, blood, I get woozy. I just can't do it. So I'm like, I'm a complete wimp. But I always felt like I was better at just communicating with people and understanding the nuts and bolts of a business. And for some reason, I always had an knack for finance and cash, just understood how it worked and how to leverage it. And so I thought, I'm going to do something with business. Even though my dad, he pushed me hard. He was like, you got to do this. In fact, he was a forensic dentist too. So he identified people that had unfortunately been murdered or had been killed in an accident or a plane crash or something. And so, my dad always was trying to push me. He's like, maybe you should do this because, it's CSI stuff. It's really cool. And I remember going onto a scene one time with my father when I was younger, and I couldn't even hold down what I had eaten that night before for about 1 minute. I was like, I just can't do this. I don't know how anybody does. I'm glad that he was able to do it, but I just couldn't do it. So I went into business. And so I came out to school here. I was in BYU land in 1992. So I moved out here. My brother and my sisters had come out here to go to school. All of us, except for my brother, didn't really want to go to the school where my dad was a dean. Because you would be at a school where your dad was a dean, right? And kind of a big name. And we wanted to get out of the city and try something different. We had cousins that lived out here in Alpine. And so we would come out, during summers occasionally. And so we fell in love with Utah. So it was easy for me to come out here. And I thought it would be better for me to come out here because Chicago wasn't the greatest thing for me when I was a single dude. It was a little too much fun.
Yeah, I could imagine.
Yeah.
And what did you study while at BYU?
So business, marketing, and finance.
Okay, got it.
So I like kind of both sides of it, the marketing, the creation of a product, and then I really like the finance underbelly of all business.
Cool. And coming into school, I mean, it sounds like family medical background. Did you know you wanted to get into entrepreneurship or start a business coming into BYU, or was that something you discovered along the way?
I think things are a little bit different. Back in the early 90s, everybody was saying, yeah, it'd be cool to start a business, but it was more go and work for some big company. That's just how all the conversations were with me, my roommates, people that were at school with me. And it wasn't as entrepreneurial as it is today. I think that the fabric of Utah has really changed. I remember when we started my first company, when I say we, my roommates and I, one was a computer science engineer, was going to classes at BYU, and was really smart. And he came up with this concept and this idea for streaming media. And if you think about streaming media, I mean, that dates me a little bit, but streaming media was not a thing, just wasn't back in early 90s. And so about 1998, we were talking and he said, how cool would it be if you could take like a Jaguar commercial? We were looking at a Jaguar commercial in our apartment, and he's like, put that on the web. And I'm like, that'd be dope if you could do that. He went and started working on it with some of his other classmates and came back and he showed me that commercial on the internet. And I'm like, holy shit, that is incredible.
Yeah.
And so what did I do? I just started calling Jaguar over and over and over and over and over and over again until they answered, and showed it to him and said, what would you pay me to use this? And they're like, $100,000. I'm like, sold. I'm like, I guess we have a business. And so that's how my entrepreneurial days started, is just, I guess we have a business. I guess we have a product people want. And we just started calling all of the companies, BMW and Mercedes, and we called Citibank and US Bank, and they all signed up. And so we had a business, and we were a streaming media company. That was my first company, called Capture Quest. We started it right here in Provo, and partnered with some cool people, raised some money, raised some private equity. I mean, it was a crash course in entrepreneurship. It just was.
No kidding.
And if anybody says, well, how did you know how to do it? I'm like, I didn't know anything, and neither did any of us. But we just figured it out as we went. We didn't have mentors. We had nobody. We just figured it out.
That's amazing.
It was crazy time.
That's amazing. So was that was you and a couple roommates?
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys, you mentioned raising capital. I mean, what was that capital used for? Was it coding? Was it trying to get exposure?
Yeah, the initial capital came actually from friends and family. You always start with that.
Yeah.
You don't know where to go, so you go talk to people you know. And I had just married my wife, and her father is pretty simple Southern dude. She's from Alabama, so he's a pretty simple dude. And I remember when we got married, she went to her dad and said, I need some money for the wedding. He's like, okay, great, I'll give you $2,000. And she's like, what? So I always thought this guy was a cheapo, what the freak, $2,000. And then when we started this business, he called me up one night and just said, so it sounds like you're starting some internet company. And I'm like, yeah, we are. He goes, well, I was wondering if I could invest. I'm like, sure, And I said, yeah, you can invest. What would you like to invest? He goes, well, $250. And I'm like, I can take your $250 if you want, Dad. And he said, no, I mean $250,000. I'm like, wait, what? Why did you jip us on our wedding? Yeah. So he's a saver and had money. And so that was our startup capital.
Wow, that's amazing.
So without him, we wouldn't have been able to get it off the ground, which was kind of fun.
Yeah. So I mean, dive in a little bit. So what did the next year or two look like with Capture Quest? I mean,
so Capture Quest, the $250,000 went to proof of concept. So we had to build the concept. Okay. We definitely had to pay for travel out to meet with people face to face, and those were the days that you could go right to the airport 15 minutes before your flight. There was no TSA, and you would land and get a map out like this and drive around looking at a map. Seriously, it's in my lifetime, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And we just sold. It was more about sales, and then getting supportive tech people. So the money really went to more tech, and then a few creative minds too. A lot of the people would say, well, we want to do that, but we would need to hire our ad agency to work with you to get the files you need to put it into this technology. And we're like, no, we'll do it. So we hired a bunch of really bright creative minds from BYU and from UVU. At the time it was UVSC. Mm-hmm. But we would hire these incredible minds and great creative minds, and they would create stuff for these Fortune 100 companies, and they loved it. And then the price that we charged for it was obviously not enough, because they're like, these prices are amazing. So we actually started building out the whole agency side of it. And then we ultimately acquired an ad agency to have full agency skill sets too. I mean, it was kind of a business that just continued to morph and grow. It was amazing.
Yeah. So were you in school the whole time during this, or did this?
Yeah, that's the hard thing about my story is, I try to tell everybody, including my boys. I have a son right now who's going to school right now, and he's in his going into his third year. And I always say, stick with it, son, stick with it. I didn't stick with it. I was in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. I was an entrepreneur. And so it was hard because I was married. We got pregnant pretty quick, which was not a plan. It was just meant to be, I guess.
Yeah.
But so she was having a baby, my wife, and we were building a home, which I don't know why we were building a home so young. I was looking at it as more of a financial opportunity, and I was going to school. So I was like, what am I doing? This is impossible. So I actually pulled out of school as I was doing Capture Quest, and then would go at nights, a couple classes, and then finished off at University of Phoenix, actually. Because I could only do it at nights and weekends. I was too busy.
Yeah, makes sense.
And so, I'm glad that I finished it. It was a great checkbox for me. And then I went down the road to start my MBA. And then same thing, I just couldn't pull it off. Could not pull it off. It was too busy. And so I'm still, after 26 years of doing entrepreneurship, I'm still like, I'll go back and finish my MBA one of these days. Now I'm like, that's just never going to happen.
Yeah, sure.
It's too busy. Life is too busy.
Yeah, that's pretty common. I think with entrepreneurs, it's just, you can only do so much. And when you start having success in one area, sometimes it's hard to justify, well, I'm going to go sit in a classroom and learn about, chemistry or whatever classes are required to graduate when you're literally learning on the daily through the business. Daily. So makes a lot of sense.
I think the biggest thing though, with everybody that's listening to, and you're going, I just don't need school. Maybe I just don't need it. And you probably would say the same thing if you had a kid thinking about going to college, right? And it's not the college and what you learn there. You're going to learn some things that are kind of the structure in your mind of how to build upon that concept with new concepts you're learning. But I really just think it trains your mind on growing and expanding the capabilities of what you can do, right? Yeah. It's also process. It's going to class, it's getting an assignment, it's learning how to write, it's learning how to submit things on time, it's learning to be punctual. It's all the soft skills that I think that the generation that's not going is missing. Mm-hmm. So I think everybody should go for that reason. I love the adage of like going, well, I don't even know why you have this class because I'm never going to use it in my life. And maybe not, but the things that you're learning going through the process, you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think from a credential standpoint, I think the world is shifting a bit, but when you get into a certain level of institutional, like capital raising or what have you, there is this box that kind of still gets checked of like
100%.
You
need it.
Whatever, bachelor degree, just things like that where like how where's this person coming from? So I still think that's important as well. So yeah, agree, Andrew. So what happened with CaptureQuest? Did you guys end up selling that?
Yeah, so it's an interesting time. We were in the 2001 era, and in 2001 we were doing incredibly well. We were on the path or the process of going public. We wanted to go public. Wow. And some of our competitors in the market had gone public and had some phenomenal IPOs. And unfortunately, as we were kind of prepping for that process, the whole world came to an end. Everybody knows it as the dot-com bubble. I know it as many nights with tears in my eyes looking at the ceiling going, what do I do? Everybody else calls it the dot-com bubble. I mean, I lived it. I didn't read about it. And it was it was a dark time. It's very, very tough because you're high in the hog. Everything's great. It's never going to end to, holy crap, my life is coming to an end. It's not really, but that's how you feel, right? Mm-hmm. We made it through it because we had revenue. We had big companies using our technology, so they were still paying their bills, which helps, right? We did have to consolidate a bit just like everybody else, but we made it through it. And one of our competitors that was down in Huntington Beach, Mind Arrow Systems, approached us and said, we should acquire you. There's consolidation out there. Got great tech. We have great tech. Let's do it together instead of apart. And so it was, they were rolling up other technology companies too at the same time. And so we were purchased by that company. So in essence, it was a success. In my mind, it was a huge success. Would it have been a better success if we would have been an IPO for me and my family? Sure. Was it still wildly successful for so many reasons and financially? Well, of course. Yeah. But it's just not the level I thought it was going to be, and that's okay.
Got it. So that sounds like about a decade of from early 90s to 2000, early 2000s.
Yeah, the CaptureQuest arena was about 4.5 years. When I was going to school, it was 92, and then I went on an LDS mission to Dominican Republic, so I had a little bit of a break in between there.
Got it.
I went late, but I went. Yeah. That's all that matters.
There you go. That's great. Okay, so successful exit, and then I saw here, Andrew, you had a couple other companies, Money Wizard and Access Point. Maybe if you could touch on those.
Yeah, just real quick. Money Wizard was one that I started. I always had people, even when I was younger in my 20s, they would come to me for financial advice. I don't know why, but employees would, other people that had exits, people that had a real estate transaction come and say, I've got $200,000 or $100,000 or $1 million, or what would you do with it? And I'm like, why are you asking me? And I did have some success when I was younger, and so I had money. And so people are like, well, since he has money, maybe he knows what to do with it. I'm like, I'm still figuring it out myself. But I had some philosophy on how to use money, how to leverage it, and how to build more wealth out of it that was kind of non-traditional. And so I thought, you know what? I sold CaptureQuest. I was with that company for 3 quarters, reporting quarters. So I was a public company, and I learned that I didn't love public. The public arena is for some people. It wasn't for me. It was soulless from an entrepreneurship standpoint. In my mind, I was an entrepreneur at that point, and I just loved the creation and the growth and the drive, not the numbers and reporting.
Yeah.
Even though numbers and reporting are a big deal, even when you're private, you still have a board, you still have investors most likely, and so it's still part of it, but it just doesn't feel so intense. And so I left, and a day later I started a company called Money Wizard, which was just the creation of a financial software where you put all of your data and input in, and it would kick you out a program or a process that you should follow to build additional wealth. Well, I created it. It was on a DVD, believe that, or a CD that you put in your computer. Back then, that's how you did it. And then it was a manual and a book and everything else that I created. And we started selling it to financial wealth companies that they would then take it and then get, sell it to their clients, or they would use it within their company. And we had one out in Michigan that was using it. I went out and would present to 200, 300, 400, 500 people at a time about the system and how to use it. And they were clients of theirs. Mm-hmm. And they came to me about a year and a half into that process is all. And they said, we don't want anybody else using this. And I'm like, well, that's not your choice. And like, well, what if we bought it? And I'm like, make an offer. And they made an offer I couldn't refuse. So I sold it to them. So it was kind of a fun bird in the hand moment for me.
Yeah.
And it's fun to see that they still use that. And then Access Point, I started literally right after that too. I haven't really had a break, Chase, by the way. From one thing to the next. Like I don't ever take a break. I don't know why. I should probably learn from some of my other friends that are like, yeah, we moved to Paris for a year with the family. It's like, I don't even know what that would be like. But with Access Point, it was an idea that I had because I had built, a home, and then I built another home. And when I moved into the home, I remember spending, I can't remember what I spent on my first home, hundreds of thousands of dollars, $500,000 or whatever. And this builder would put all of my use and care manuals and details on the home and stuff. They just stuff it in drawers or put it on top of the appliance and stuff. I'm like, geez, you pay all this money for this beautiful home, and you just got to be a better way than that. Mm-hmm. You should be able to create a technology around that to organize it. And so we created a company called Access Point, which was the point of access between builder and homeowner, and created a technology called the Home Profile. It was really simple. We trademarked it, copywrote it, and it was a technology where we put all of the data in the whole world of homes, from appliances to manufacturer information and warranty information and subs and insurance, everything into a technology database. And then we would have the builders go in and they would just select which products they use to put in the home, and it would pull all of that data out of the system and then create a profile for you and your wife to be able to refer back to say, Johnny just put a hole, through the wall in his bedroom. We need to know what paint it was, which color, which sheen, what the code is, and you could look it right up and it would be right there. So I did that, and we had unbelievable success with that. We raised $35 million from a private equity firm out in the Bay Area, a multi-billion-dollar private equity firm, which was, at that time, one of the larger rounds of funding. I mean, this is back in 2003, 2004. Mm-hmm. Now, $30 million is just par for the course around here. $100 million is a big deal, right?
Yeah.
But we raised a good amount of money, had an amazing board of directors, ex-Fortune 500 CEOs that were sitting on my board and the private equity group. And I learned so much during that time. It was hard. It was tough. We had 2,800 builders across America using the product. Everyone from Donald Trump was using it and his organization down to the local home builder.
Wow.
And so we had unbelievable clients, and we were growing month over month. And then 2008 hit, and it was same thing. It was a 2001 redo where I'm like, how can this happen in two times in someone's career? Like, where literally the balloon gets popped by one episode. And it felt like it was just the same thing. Like the whole world was coming to an end within a month, 2 months. So pivoted, shrunk down, had to reposition the company. And we did, and we ultimately sold it to a company out of California. And so again, in my wildest dreams that I think I was going to do that with Access Point, no. Was it a success? Yes. Was it exactly what I wanted? No. But I think I'm learning in my career that having expectations of where you are ultimately going to be, and if you don't get there, if you're a failure or not, I don't think that's true. I think that there's success in just trying, and then getting to new levels in your business, and then having success in different ways and different markers. It's not all about money. Have I made money on those transactions? Sure. Was I the next Mark Zuckerberg? No, but it's okay.
Yeah. That's amazing. Is Access Point still, it sounds like
still around.
It's still around?
Technology's still there. Some of my original employees are still there 15 years later after I've left. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like a great product. We've
it's a great product.
Couple different new homes in the last year.
You have that pressure, huh? You're just like, oh, it's crap everywhere.
Where's the paint color? Where holes in the wall and the fridge and oh man.
I lost a shingle. Where do I even go for that? Is there a warranty on that? Yeah, it's crazy.
No, that's
but it's still being used, and people are still working there with the company that bought it. It's amazing.
That's amazing.
Which is with technology, it never happens. Like technologies change and they go obsolete, and they just continue to improve it. And it's still there. It's pretty cool.
Is it still called Access Point?
Still called Access Point. Still called the Home Profile.
Okay,
you can look it up. Just new owner.
Yeah, look it up. That's awesome. And just backing up a little bit. So from your early college days, 15 years later, you've started and sold 3 companies successfully. What was it about? How did you get these ideas, the drive? It sounds like you just had things just coming to you. I don't know. It's very unique to.
It is, and I think that there's a lot of people that I've seen that are entrepreneurs that have been entrepreneurs their whole life, where they'll start something, it's not really a success. They'll start something else, it's a success, and then they have like this this period of time where they're trying to figure out what to do next for 5 or 10 years, and then they get involved with something else, and then it's successful too.
Yeah.
For some reason, Chase, it was just like one after another for me, and it just happened. And I don't know if it was meant to be or not, but I just feel like I had the idea of Capture Quest with my roommates, and we did it. And then I had the idea of Money Wizard kind of toward the end of Capture Quest anyway. I'm like, I'll do that sometime. And then I had the time, and I had the money to invest myself into creating it. And then the same thing with Access Point. I literally sold Money Wizard in like a day later. It's like, yeah, I just moved in this home. I know it's a problem. So my ideas came from, there's either a lot of questions being asked to me, and then I would look around and say, well, there's not a really good answer for that, or it doesn't exist yet, or it exists, but I think I can do it better. And then with Access Point, I just wanted it myself, right? Like you just said, you and your wife, you've built a couple times and you have a home, and you're just like, this is stupid. Like, why don't they, this is an expensive asset of mine, my most expensive asset. Why don't I have something that like gives me my information? You buy a car and you get it. Yep. You don't get that for your home.
Yeah.
So it just seemed like that makes sense, and nobody's doing it. I'll figure it out. And it was very hard to figure it out, but we figured it out. So things just made sense with going into food. And I know you're probably going to try to pivot to that, but going into food too, I was doing, well, when I was saying doing, I was trying to stay alive with Access Point, right? Because the market was literally on meltdown. If you remember those days, you were probably reading about it then, right?
I mean, I was
2008,
14, 15, 16. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you probably didn't understand it as much as you do now because you read about it, but those days were spooky. I mean, you felt like the world was coming to an end. Yeah. This bank's failing. This bank's failing. It feels like what we're dealing with right now this month, right? Although I look at it, I'm like, I know everybody's likening it to the 2008 crash. There's some similarities, but it's just not the same. I mean, you liken it too much, and you're going to kind of make what you don't want to have happen if you're not careful. But it's not the same. But when that was happening, we were talking. My wife was the mother of our 2 boys. We have 2 boys, and at the time they were toddlers, so they could kind of take care of themselves. And Shauna was always an amazing partner and corporate spouse, corporate wife. I'd go home and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm dealing with this now. Like, what should we do?" And she felt like she was already my partner. And you need to have that person in your life. And if it's not your spouse, find that person, because you just need someone you can vent to, and then they're not going to judge you for you saying, "I don't know what to do." Right. Yeah. And she was that person. And so she was always, and I kind of likened it now that we're partners with the Miller Company, with Larry H. Miller. Gail Miller is very much so the same. The story is very similar. And when we've sat and talked with Gail, and Shauna has too, Gail did the same thing with Larry. Larry would come home and they would talk business. And so when he passed away, it wasn't like she didn't know anything. She actually had some of that business experience, because it was very similar to Shauna. She was just there for me. She was my co-founder and everything in my mind, even though she wasn't going to work every day. And she said, I think that I'd like to go and do something, myself. I'd like to get back into the workforce. I love being a mom. It's my number one job, but I would really like to be, I feel like I have more to give. I said, great. What would you like to do? And I'm in the middle of hell, right? Yeah. I was growing at the time when we made this decision. And then as we started going down this road, the market fell apart. But she said, I want to start a restaurant. I'm like, oh my gosh, that is the dumbest idea. Like, why would you ever want to do that? They all fail. None of them make money. The typical fallacies that you have, and I have in my mind, I did. You can't make money. It's the dumbest decision. You work 24/7, which you do. Why would you want to do it? But being, supportive to her like she was to me, I'm like, great, let's do it, Shauna. Yeah. And I'm like, what do you want to do? And she's like, I think I want to put a restaurant up here. We live in Highland, Alpine area, and that area, there's just was not any food, 15 years ago, nothing. And SR 92 is a 2-lane highway, right? It's not the 17 that it is now, but it's not 17, but you know what I mean.
I get it.
But she says, yeah, I want to put a restaurant right down here. So we have restaurants for us and all of our neighbors up here. I'm like, great, what do you want to do? And she says, Neater's Bakery and Cafe. And I'm like, cool, I like that place, good, fresh. So the story goes, and this is what happened, is we went and met with the founders. They're in London here. And I remember in the conversation, I just said, so why don't you have one of these on every corner in America? I mean, it's a great concept, fresh food, people enjoy it. And their answer was really the impetus of what I am today, 15 years later. And so I'll give them credit for that. And that is, they said, we haven't built a team to scale beyond here in Utah. I have never done it before. And capital, raising it, structuring it, it's just something that we haven't done yet. We don't know if we have had that experience. And so in my mind, Chase, I thought, that's me. I can do that. That's easy. Little did I know it's a really tough business. but it is calculatable. I mean, you can calculate a good return on it, and you can calculate cash flows better than you can tech and better than you can a lot of other industries. I didn't know that until later. So anyway, I said, Shauna, let's do it. We bought a piece of land, and it was crazy because we bought that piece of land up there that we bought right in front of Smith's. The next day I was driving down, and there's a big sign, and it's like, call and buy a piece of land. And so I called up the billboard there or whatever in front of the Smith's marketplace that was being built.
Yep.
Tyson Moore was his name, and Rob Moore. And I said, Tyson, I'd like to buy that lot. What does it cost? Well, it's $1 million. I'm like, for what? 1 acre. I'm like, great. So I bought it. Little did I know, about 4 months later when the market crashed, it'd be worth about $500,000 or $600,000. So I bought it at the wrong time.
Sure.
But I bought the land. We built the building, and we were building it and finishing it right in the middle of the crash. So I was like, this is the dumbest decision I've ever made. But you know what? We're going to just give it a shot. And I remember we opened up in October of 2008, again, right in the middle of the meltdown.
Yep.
And where my life was literally on fire, like fire. I would pass in the mornings watching Shauna go into the store, and it crushed it. It was the busiest Kneaders out of the gate. It was cash flowing the first month.
Amazing.
And I'm like, cash flow? What the hell's cash flow? Like, I'm in tech.
Right.
I'm like, you
Right.
never cash flow. And I just saw the cash position in that business just continue to grow because I kind of helped behind the scenes with her. And so I went through that crazy cycle with Access Point for about 6 more months, decided to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
We, as a board, offloaded it to a company in California. When I say offloaded it, they took over the operations in the business and bought it. And literally about a week after I sold it, I was like, I think I'm going to go join my wife. And so I called up Shauna and said, I think I want to come join you. And she says, great. The dish washer didn't show up today. Come on in. So no kidding. I went in and I just started working in the business, washing dishes, making food, making sandwiches, learning how to use a cash register. I honestly just thought I got to go just learn the business. And that's how Shauna and I started. But she was doing it for 6 months before me. She was crushing it. She loved it. She was having fun. I was not liking what I was doing because the market was on fire. And the one thing I will say before you ask your next question is the thing that I realized about this industry is that the market can be so cyclical. It can be up, it can be down, it can be uncertain, which it is right now in the world. It does not matter on the food and beverage industry. You and I have to eat 3 times a day. It doesn't matter if we're in a good mood or a bad mood, we're going to have to eat. And so it's a necessity of life that doesn't ever go anywhere depending on what's going on in the world. And I liked that stability. With tech, if the markets go down, you go down. If the banking system falls apart, you go down, even if you're not tied to the banking system. And I didn't like that cyclicality of that. And I really like the cyclicality of food and beverage, which is really up and to the right for the last 40 years.
Yeah. And I'd say, especially in kind of the fast casual or higher end fast casual where you guys focus, it's not like you're going out to Ruth's Chris or spending $150 on a meal. It's like, hey, I need lunch today. I'm going to head over to R&R or wherever,
Yep.
right, and grab some. So it makes perfect sense. So for that first Kneaders, and by the way, my parents live in Alpine. That's a great location.
Yeah,
I've been there several times.
Yeah. First restaurant of all of our restaurants was that one.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So were you franchisees? Is that how you structured it?
Yeah, so we were franchisees at that first store, and then we went to them and said, we have a moon shot. We want to do 10 of them. And so we contracted for 10. We started building them throughout Utah. And then, and we didn't really have a plan to go become this like massive, restaurant empire. I mean, if you want to call it that, there's a lot larger empires than us, but we never thought we would get to that point. It was just a moonshot. We were working together, husband and wife. We loved it. I actually like my wife, so it makes it really easy.
Yeah.
We enjoy each other. We have fun together. We are attracted to each other. So all of those things matter when you work with your spouse.
Yep.
If you don't have those things, don't work with your spouse. But we enjoyed it, and it was fun. And I didn't feel like it was work. I mean, it was hard work, manual, but it wasn't work in my mind. And so we finally said, well, why don't we go much bigger with this? Because we're creating jobs, which we really liked. People needed jobs at the time. If you can remember 2008, 2010, 11, that was a tough time for families. I mean, we had people coming in and interviewing that were making $150,000 a year at a tech job. And they're like, I'll take a $30,000 a year job just so I can feed my family. It was pretty rough. So for me and Shauna were like, let's do as much good as we can while the markets are rebuilding. And we had the ability, we had the money, we had the support. And so we just started setting moonshot after moonshot. So we approached the family and said, we want to contract for 76 bakery and cafes west of the Mississippi. And so nobody could do them except for us. And we contracted that deal with the founders, and it was really a blissful time for us. We built them throughout Utah. We built them in Arizona. We built them in Colorado. We built them in Vegas. We were building them everywhere. And with that, we had to build this operating system and support system behind the scenes. Just naturally, you had to do that. And we had a lot of other brands approaching us saying, hey, what you're doing with Kneaders, could you do it for us? And we're like, no. We kept on telling them no, because we just wanted to focus on what we had in front of us. And I got a call from a broker that said there's this package of Little Caesars restaurants down in the Southeast that might be for sale, and corporate wants to chat with you. And so I got a call from some reps for the Illich family that started Little Caesars, and they said, we're looking for some commando operators. I'm like, ooh, commando operators. That sounds really intense.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have any camouflage on, but it sounds cool.
Yeah.
So I'm a true believer that you say yes to things just because you don't know what's going to come of it. Just say yes. Go see if you meet someone, see if you learn something. And so I said, yeah, I'll come out. So I went out to Detroit, spent a couple of days with the Illich family and the CEO. And I left going, yeah, I'm going to work with these people. They're great people. It's a great organization. Who in the hell has not eaten a Little Caesars pizza in their lifetime, or doesn't feed like all of their kids that, once a week?
Sure.
And so I came back and I told Shauna as I was passing her office the next day, I just said, hey, I just bought 48 Little Caesars down in the Southeast, and she kept walking down the hallway. And I remember her going, what the hell? Like in her office. And we were in the Caesars business. We bought 48 Little Caesars and started. And so we had Kneaders, Little Caesars, and then we started buying up more stores and building stores and got up to 87 or something.
Wow. So I'm curious on the funding side, the first Kneaders $1 million land acquisition, then you guys scaled from there. Was that self-funded through your exits with tech companies, or did you raise capital?
It was from the bank of Andrew and Shauna at first.
Okay.
And then you get to the point where any good business person knows you really should use OPM, right? Mm-hmm. You use other people's money along with yours is what we always feel is the right thing to do. If you're not risking it with your investors, you shouldn't ask for investors' money. That's how I feel. I'm sure you probably feel the same way. Like they know if you're in it, you're not going to lose your money, or you're going to work harder for it.
Right.
So we always would put our money in first, and then we would raise money from people that saw the success that we had and loved the brand. I mean, that's easy when you raise for a brand that you eat at, in the mornings, and you're like, oh, this place is amazing. Look how busy it is. And then you get an opportunity to invest. It's pretty easy to raise. So we would raise these little small pools of capital, SPVs more, where we would have a vehicle where we would raise money for acquisition of land and building them. We would hold several of them and be our own landlords. And then we would also sell lease back some of them. And when we would sell lease back them, there's a lot of people out there that would do a sale lease back to make a bunch of money. And I didn't actually pull a bunch of money off of the business when we did that. We would use the additional capital we made on a sale lease back to then fund another store. Mm-hmm. And then we would sell it, and then we would use that and do another store. So we were building an empire of restaurants with the capital instead of ripping as much as we could off of the business initially. And there was restaurant groups that did that. They're like, well, the way to make $1 million quick is to buy the land, build the building, put a big lease on it, and then sell it, for 5 cap, 6 cap, make $1 million, and I'm going to make millions of dollars just on the land. And it's like, well, that's stupid because you just put a big, huge lease on your building or business that you own and you operate.
Yeah.
We would set it at a normal rate that we wanted. We wanted the rent to be, 6-7% of sales. So we would set it at that and sell it. And if we made 3 or 4 or 500,000, we were like, hey, high five, this is amazing. Mm-hmm. But we could have screwed ourselves if we would have done more on the lease.
Right.
We just decided not to. So we were always for good operation, sound operation, good cash flows in the business. And we just rolled the cash flows. Was it a good business for taking distributions? Absolutely. A lot of money came out of that business. But we had the money to roll. So we were really self-funding. And the whole reason we even pivoted into creating Savory was because we were approached by so many people saying, can you do what you're doing for others, for us? And we just didn't want to risk all of our own capital and have all those guarantees. When it's yours and we owned 80% of the business still, and we shared it with the other 20% with our partners and executives and everything else.
Yeah.
You don't want to take all the risk for other businesses and other people if you don't own it. And the whole structure of Savory came together with a good friend of mine, Greg Warnock, that's the founder of Mercado Partners. He and I were racing at the time, the Porsche Pirelli series around the country, and just got talking in the pits one day in between races. And 2.5 hours later, I stood up and shook his hand, and I had joined his firm as an MD, just creating this new concept called Savory that we were going to do food and beverage investments and grow and scale like I had the other brands. And at that point in time, we thought it would be good for us to get out of franchising, because the whole model in my mind was do it with emerging brands that are corporate owned first, build the process and the systems and get the right people in place, prove it out, and then you'll get a lot larger multiple on your invested capital before you go to franchise. And that's what we created. That's why we do what we do. It doesn't mean that franchising is not good. It's not ready. Every business is not ready for that until it's ready.
Yeah, makes sense.
So that's kind of the quick down and dirty as to how Savory was created and why we did that. We were in the franchise arena with Kneaders and Little Caesars. We sold those off and had 3 unbelievable brands we had just made investments into as 4 Foods Group in a corporate position, which was R&R BBQ, Swig, and then Mobetta's Hawaiian.
Got it.
And so we had owned those, we kept those, and we rolled those over and purchased them into Savory. So these Savory investors, the initial Savory investors, made the acquisition of those 3 first brands.
Okay.
And then that went out to all the 4 Foods Group shareholders.
Got it.
Stakeholders.
And that was about 2018, 2017?
It was 2017 we came up with the idea. 2018 we launched Savory. So yeah, the transaction was 2018.
Yeah, that's amazing.
The rest is bliss.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, that's I've mentioned a couple times on the show. So I franchise at Crumble Cookies out in Georgia.
I've heard of them.
Yeah,
I've heard of Crumble.
Great brand.
Jason and Sawyer have done an amazing job with that business.
Yeah, they have. It's
1 in a million actually.
What was that?
It's 1 in a million. We've looked at 1,400 brands in the nation. 1,400, mind you. Think about that.
That's a
lot. Conversations with founders, 1,400, and there's more every single week. And I would just say that what they've done, how they've executed it, and how sticky that has been, not the wrong sticky, but like how sticky that concept has been so fast. I think you only see once every few decades.
Yeah.
And they've hit it. It's been incredible to watch. And I always give them kudos. They're great dudes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so anyway, I have some firsthand experience on the franchisee side. We opened the first one up in the state of Georgia.
How'd it go?
Had a good run. It was good. It was great. We ended up selling it.
Okay.
Focused more so on the real estate side, but great experience. And so to hear how you guys were able to go from 1 Kneaders to 150
Kneaders and a lot of other restaurants,
and all that. That's incredible. And it's always curious because you see the McDonald's and all these different restaurants and brands, and it's always interesting who owns that. How did they structure that? How did they get
to that point?
How did they get to that point of having 70 McDonald's or what have you? And so that's great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Andrew. So yeah, transitioning to Savory. 2017, 2018. So you'd already made the initial investment in Swig and Mobetta's R&R. Those were kind of your first deals. What have you guys done over the last 5-6 years as you've grown to be able to build a brand the way you have?
Yeah, I think this industry is interesting because everybody looks at it as fun and exciting. I mean, when you sit in a restaurant and it's busy, there's really not any place like it, right? The sights, the sounds, the smells, the activity, the way you feel, the connections you're making with the person you're with, whether it's your spouse or friends or business colleagues, it's memorable. It makes an imprint on our mind. And I think a lot of times people are like, I want to do this. It was kind of why you did it at Crumble, right? You would go in and like, look at these people getting cookies and this brand is amazing and I could make some good cash on it. And then you get into it and you're like, there's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Employees every single day having to open up and product issues and customer complaints. And it's not perfect. It's an imperfect business. And it's a business where you have 1,000 details that you have to execute flawlessly every day for you to really grow a business. It's hard. And it takes an army, right? You can't just open one and then go open another and another and another on your own. You need experts in all aspects of the business to run it at a high level. And so for us, over the last 5 years since we came up with the idea of Savory, and then we launched Savory Fund 1, which was a $100 million fund, which, mind you, there's a lot of funds out there that their first-time fund is $5 million, $10 million,
sure.
$30 million. We raised a $100 million first-time fund. Fund 1.
Yeah.
It's the largest Fund 1 raised in Utah.
Wow. I didn't realize that.
And that I know of. I'd love to hear anybody else that has a fund 1 that did $100 million.
That's amazing.
And we were oversubscribed. We had people that wanted to come in after. And with that, we had the 3 brands, R&R, Mobetta's, and Swig. And then we bought 2 other brands, Via 313, which is a Detroit-style concept, and then Crack Shack, which is out of Southern California, which is a better chicken, bone-in chicken concept. Unbelievable. And my partner and I were sitting end of 2020 I have a cabin up in Park City, and we were sitting there and we're like, well, if we allocate the money that we have to those 5 brands for growth, we're pretty much done with Fund 1. I'm like, yeah, we actually are. And he's like, let's kick off Fund 2. I'm like right now? And he's like, yeah, right now. I'm like, okay. So we launched it January 1st of 2021, and it was a 6-week raise. I mean, we raised another $100 million in 6 weeks, which is pretty unheard of. And Went out and acquired another 5 brands, made a tech investment. We get approached a lot with food and beverage tech because my background's tech. And so we look at a lot, but we only get ones that, invest in ones or even are interested in ones that are very core to core sales, core tech in a business. And a lot of them are just peripheral. And so we don't invest into those. We'll make that more of an emphasis in Fund 3 as we launch that here this year. But we were on an acquiring binge 2021, 2022 with 5 new brands. And we'll do the same thing with Fund 3. So probably raise another 150 actually in Fund 3 and then do 6 or 7 brands in that one. But the same thesis holds, and that is you get all these brands that are out there and they're really in this decision quadrant of, do we stay lifestyle? I have 5 brands, our corporate stores, my family owns it. Mm-hmm. We're working every day of our lives, weekends, nights, all of our kids work there, friends work there. But we make a really good living. It's a great cash flowing business. Do I stay that, or do I want to become a legacy brand? And a legacy brand is one that is regional, maybe even national. It's one that's more of a household name, that you create a household name out of it. But it requires a lot more. It requires a lot of capital. It requires a lot of influence from a lot of different people with expertise in different disciplines. It's not easy. It's hard. It's very hard. And I think people look at it and go, well, to become a legacy brand, I have 2 options then. I can franchise it, where I don't have to come up with the capital. I push that off to people like Chase to go and build it in Georgia.
Yep.
They do all the work and I take a piece of the top and then I give them the recipes and the brand and everything else. Or I stay corporate and I control it. I go at the pace I want. I don't report to people. They don't report to me. We work together in conjunction with what we want to create as a legacy brand. Now, neither of those are right or wrong. It's just not a right or wrong decision. If you decide franchising, could be right for you. It was right for Crumble, right? Others, they went too fast and they got to 15, 20, 30 stores open with franchisee partners and exploded. And there's brands that we've looked at and they're like, can you bail us out of this problem we just created? And it's like, that's not what we're here for.
Yeah.
But legacy brands, in my mind, they have a longer term, stable future if you build a really good nucleus of corporate stores with the process, with the procedures, with the tech stack, with the people in place that know how to build a brand and build a brand identity, and then potentially franchise it. And still maybe never franchise it, but then at least you have the optionality. That's what we did with Swig. We were approached on that hundreds of times a year.
Sure.
We just said, we're not doing that right now. And why did a lot of copycats pop up around that brand? Because we said no to franchise, interested parties. Yep. So what do you naturally do? You go copy it. That's exactly what people do. They're not original, so they just copy. But that we created the copycats because we said no. And that was fine. It didn't matter to us. We were paving the way. Now, we have 52 stores, I think, right now open, all corporate owned, and a little over 280 franchise stores sold as of today.
Wow.
That are signed up and ready to go. Has never been announced. You just have the first data right there.
Go, right here.
But that will be done by larger multi-unit franchisees. That was one thing that we wanted to do, is larger groups, and the blocks that we've been selling are between 20 and 40 units to each of those groups. You wouldn't have been able to do that if you were a 1, 2, or 3 unit concept. And so us having this operation that's already very established and has all the data that you would want as a larger franchisee, multi-unit franchisee, now we can attract them and have those real conversations, and we'll let the onesie twosies go to others.
Yeah,
if they want to.
That's it. Great thesis, taking these family brands or 5 to 8 locations, corporate owned. So the idea with Savory is you're going to scale those to 30, 35, 40 locations.
Yeah, some of them 30, some of them 50.
Yeah.
It just depends on the economics of the brands and how much we want to approve with them as well. Mm-hmm. The next set of buyers, it's interesting because I remember when I was at 4 Foods Group, building that company, and we were doing the Kneaders concept. We would have private equity groups approach me all the time. They'd say, Andrew, what you're doing is amazing. Nobody else is growing. Everybody's paused. The market's crap, and you're growing. I'm like, well, this is the time you grow. When there's a barn fire, you run in with a hose. You don't just sit there and watch it burn. There's opportunity. And so we kind of were the idiots that ran in there with a hose and just said, let's buy cheaper land. Let's build at cheaper rates. Let's get cheaper rents. Let's get better employees. We took advantage of that. And so for us, we looked at how we built out Kneaders and thought, could you do that again, with the Savory platform, but do it in a non-franchise way and do it corporate owned and do it in a way that we could control not only the experience for the guests, but control the brand and the likeness of the brand to multiple geographies, to where these private equity groups that came to me when I was 4 Foods and say, we would love to invest 10 or 20 million. Those same groups now, they can't write 10 or 20 million dollar checks. Their check sizes have gone to 100, 150, 200 million.
Sure.
Because they keep getting larger and larger, but they want to get into these corporate enterprises where they have a lot of meat on the bone for them to grow. And so I just saw this chasm. I saw the chasm that was created more and more as it kind of widened, where they could write a smaller check and the chasm was kind of like this big to get me from 10 units to maybe 50 units. Those people have kind of gone away.
Mm-hmm.
They've become bigger. And now I'm filling that chasm with Savory because it's needed. It's not just money though. It's the playbook. It's the team. It's the playbook. We have 80 people in our office that are from all disciplines and walks of the restaurant life that they have. They're experts. I'm not an expert at everything. I have a team of people around me that make us look like it's easy. It's not easy, but they're all just experts at what they do. So we do everything under the roof for all of our brands to get them to the point where we can hire their own teams and then make them ready for maybe the next buyer like a Larry H. Miller to come in and say, we don't know how to do this, but you have a team already built and the proof. So now we'll pay to buy in. Some of them will keep a little bit of equity, Savory, to ride it to the next stage because we think the best is yet to come with Swig. And others will probably sell all out, depends on what the buyer wants. Yeah. But the nice thing is, and I'll tell this to you about any business that I've ever created, and that is I don't build a business to sell. There's too many entrepreneurs that sit in front of me with restaurant concepts. They're like, well, I just want to build this as fast as I can and then sell it off to someone else. I'm like, and don't you think the person that's going to buy it from you is smart enough to understand that that's what you're building? They're going to see that. They're going to see you're just pumping this up to dump your problems to me and then I have to deal with that. They're not going to pay you what you think. I just think that there's too many fallacies in people's minds saying it's easy, just grow as fast as you can. And it doesn't matter if you're profitable or not. Someone else will buy it because it's a lot of momentum behind it. It's like, that is not business. Business is creating a business that is going to be a business that's around forever. As long as you can think out, right? 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And if you're operating a good business, opportunities will come and knock on your door to want to take that from you and go to that next level, right? So build a business to be around forever and that you're going to be there forever. Don't build it just to sell it tomorrow because everyone can see it. They can see your for sale sign in your car window. Don't think that they can.
So good. Yeah, and when Nicole was on here, she hit on that very hard about how helpful Savory was in building the systems, the processes to get it in a place where it could be sold if you guys desire to do that. But that's such a niche and awesome role you guys are playing, kind of that middle market, getting the infrastructure, making it packaged and growing it to a sustainable clip. Very super smart. I love it. Well, in terms, you mentioned raising capital. It's something that whenever I have a private equity real estate or whoever on here, I love to talk about because I think it's very interesting. $100 million Fund 1, similar size sounds like for Fund 2, going for about $150 million on Fund 3. Would love to hear kind of best case, strategies that you guys utilize for raising capital, and also what that makeup looks like. $100 million, is that friends and family? Is that family offices? It's institutional capital. If you could touch on raising capital, would be great.
Yeah, raising capital is interesting. I think you said in my bio I raised 500 and something million. I think it's 700 and something million now. I mean, raising capital, and when I say raising capital, it is raising private funding. It's raising family office funding, institution pension. It's also raising money from banks. That's not easy. I mean, if you think about bank financing, you've done it before too, Chase. Mm-hmm. It's tough. Like you have to sit down and have a very good thesis that the bank's going to say, we trust you, we're going to give it to you. It's not, I filled out the application, I have good credit. They're going to evaluate you as a candidate that can repay. That's their job, is to lend it and get it repaid. So raising capital it's an art form. There's not a science to it. And unfortunately, I wish that I could just say, go read a book on how to raise money. And then once you get to the end of the book, you're going to be able to go out and raise $100 million, $200 million, $10 million, $1 million. It's not. There's an art form to it. And I wish I could teach it. Thought about how would you teach someone to do it? And I don't think you can teach it. I think that you have to watch it be done and see the repetition of it and hear and see and watch the little subtleties that get a deal closed. When I say a deal closed, like an investor to commit. And I think for me, it's all about performance. I mean, you have to perform. It's the same thing when I invest into things too. If Chase, you came to me and said, hey, I got this property. Well, show me your last 4 or 5 or 6 properties you've done and show me the prospectus on it and what you thought you were going to do and how it ended up and why or why not did you hit your mark. It's about history, right? It's about your performance. And so for me, I take that very serious. I think, could I go faster, bigger, badder, do more? Sure. I could be 5 times the amount of funds that I've raised. I could have 35 brands right now. I choose not to because I want to perform. I want everything I have to perform. It's not quantity, it's quality of my assets. It's quality of performance. once you have a history of performance, it becomes a little easier that when you sit down with investors of all makes, doesn't matter if it's an individual investor that's high net worth, if it's a family office, if it's a pension or institution, it does not matter. They're still going to look at you and look at your performance and your ability to fulfill what you say you're going to fulfill, right?
Yeah.
So it starts with that, and I think it's a little bit of a teaser deck. I will give you a little secret though, and that is that I have raised not one penny off of a deck. I have never used a deck. I never show anything. All the money I raised for my businesses, my tech days, never showed anything, didn't have a presentation. I had nothing. Now, do I have that for after I meet with the investor? Sure, because their team's going to dig into it and everything else. I sit with them across the table and I just look at them in their eyes and I tell them what they want to hear and I pitch them who I am and what my vision is, what we're going to do and how we've done it or what I've done in the past.
Yeah.
I know the information and the details so well that any question they ask, I can answer it. And that's something that's really important. Know your system, know your details. Don't look at a deck. Don't go page by page with an investor. That's not what they want. They're investing based off of gut feel. I know I do. Investors do at all sizes. They're going off of gut. Will they dig in after? Yes, you have to have all your shit together, right? You have to have a data room that's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But your team can help you with that. Your CPAs, your finance guys, all those guys can help you with that. You have to sell from your heart. You have to explain to them what you're going to do, and you have to fulfill. And if you don't fulfill, listen, I have not hit 1,000, right? I just have not. I wish I've been able to bat 1,000. But man, there's not one investor that said Andrew did not kill himself to make sure that I got a return, and maybe the return wasn't as big as I thought, but he did what he said he was going to do.
Yeah, that's so good. I love it, Andrew. And I've seen talking with people like you. There is no silver bullet to raising capital. It's time, it's relationships, it's knowledge, and like you said, performance, and be able to talk to that. It just takes time and practice. So
well, and it's also fairness. If I can add that to you too, Chase. I've seen a lot of prospectus from investors that have pitched me to invest into things, and I just look at it and go, boy, you really think a lot of yourself to take all of the upside here, but then put me in the position of risk, ultimate risk. And I think that with investors, you just have to think. That's one thing I do like about private equity now that I've been doing this for 5 years. I've always understood it because I was on the other side of it and I understood how it worked. And I would pitch to hundreds of private equity groups to raise capital, for my companies. But now that I'm on the other flip side, I think, the majority of it goes to my investors, which it should, right? 80% of the profits go to them.
Sure.
They get paid back first. Love that structure. And then I take a percentage of a percentage of a percentage. Now I make less, but that's how it should be. They're taking the risk, the ultimate risk. Now, is my money with theirs in the funds? Yes, my money's with theirs too. So I'll get a return just like they will. But at the end of the day, think about the investor of they're taking the ultimate risk. So take care of them. Be fair to them. Don't create an environment where they go, well, you got your cake and you're eating it too, or you got all your fees up front, or you're getting everything and I have to take all the risk until the end. I just don't like structures like that. Never have, never will. I just don't think that's fair to an investor.
Yeah, I love it. And as you go up the scale, the more sophisticated the investor, typically they're going to be able to understand very quickly how fair of a deal they're getting.
That's right.
So
they'll see through it pretty quick.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, in terms of the fund, so Four Foods it sounded like more SPV, deal by deal, and now you transition to a fund model.
Yep, that's correct.
What have been the pros and cons of operating out of a fund versus deal by deal, and would you recommend a fund structure?
Yeah, I would recommend a fund structure for the sheer purpose of structuring governance. I like governance around money. There's too many deals. I mean, I've invested in a deal, and unfortunately, just recently got a call from a deal that I was in for 2 short months, and money's gone. Oh. And it was because governance wasn't followed, right? And so now we're all in this big disastrous mess of trying to figure it out and who's at fault and everything else. Well, the fault is the person that took the money, the leader, and not having governance, proper governance. I like private equity because there's a lot of governance around it. Now, that could sound like to most people that are listening, it's like, oh, I don't want governance. You do. If you're taking someone's money, have some governance. I did like the speed at which I could move with Four Foods, making decisions. It was very entrepreneurial still for me and Shauna. We made the decisions, we would go, and it was working. And then, of course, when we were doing Four Foods, there was a lot more cash flow coming out of the businesses because we owned it, so we could distribute when we wanted and how we wanted. And this is a little bit more of a long game. Private equity is a longer game where, as a principal and as a managing director, I put my profits and my upside at the back of the line instead of the front of the line. And so that's the big difference between Four Foods Group, SPV, raising as you go versus fund. The one thing about the fund, though, is that we make decisions knowing we have the capital there. If we commit to 10 restaurants this year for this brand, capital's there. We want to buy a brand that you have, Chase, you and your wife, capital's there. So if I made a commitment, the capital's there. And we have really good investors supporting us. We have high net worth, big family offices, and then some large wealth management firms that are our investors. And they're just the most incredible investor group to have.
That's amazing. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And we've thought about that as a firm as well. Right now, we're doing direct deal investing and hoping, like you said, getting a track record, being able to point to successful opportunities that we've done in the past, and then transitioning to more of a fund model. But certainly pros and cons. When you guys look at brands, so you mentioned a few of them that are fantastic. How do you guys think about selecting brand? You said 1,400 you looked at over the last year or two.
I'm pretty picky.
What causes one to stand out?
Yeah, it's a question that people ask us all the time. Even our investors are like, how do you know the next brand to pick? And I think that as you start meeting with so many, they start standing out a little easier, the ones that are unique. And when I say unique, think about the experience that you have with your wife when you go into a restaurant for the first time. You've never heard of it before. You're in a different state. I mean, usually around your neighborhood, you know all the restaurants, right? Mm-hmm. But you go into a state and then you go into a restaurant and it has that it factor, right? Like you leave, you're like, I don't really know what that just was, but the flavors were amazing. Again, it's the sensories. It's the sights, the sounds, the smells, the signals that your brain is kind of firing off. And you'll even go, that was unique. That's what we go for initially. It has to have the it factor. It's hitting on all cylinders. Then we really have to meet with the founder first off. And for us, we make decisions based on founders about 90% of the way. It's just how we have to do it. We're going to be in a partnership with these people a long time. And I can usually find about in 15 minutes the yes or no in my mind of if I would partner with that person. Mm-hmm. Because we have a no asshole policy.
Sure.
I think all of us do in life. We just don't want to deal with difficult people. And unfortunately, there are people out there that own businesses in all different segments that are difficult. And we're just to the point now in our careers and our lives and with a fund that we're just going to pick good people. And I've just got to say we have some of the best founders in the industry as our founder partners. You met one of them with Nicole.
Yeah.
All of them are very similar, just great humans. They have the same outlook on what they want to grow, which is a legacy brand. They know what it's going to take, but they don't know exactly how to do it, but we do. And they know it's going to be hard, and we set that up front. Like, this is not going to be a cakewalk. We're going to cut a deal. It's going to be a lot more work, not less work. But it comes down to the founders. So we pick the founders, and then after we look at the founders and say we want to be partners with these guys, then it's got to have industry-leading economics. I mean, it really has to have a business that's making money, knows how to make money. We're not a fix-it and turnaround shop. There's things that you have to turn around in any business or that you can fix and make better. But even if we didn't fix it, or things that we saw that we could improve, it would still be a phenomenal business without that. So we buy into businesses that have great founders and have unbelievable economics that we already see a way and a path to scale them. Then it just comes down to the right process and systems and structure foundation so you can actually scale it without breaking it.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Well, I was in LA in Century City, 2018-19, and the Crack Shack was there in Century City Mall. And I remember going there, we would go happy hour after work, JP Morgan.
Yep.
I remember thinking, this place is pretty cool. Like,
super
had
cool.
That it factor.
Had that
right?
it factor.
And I think it was before your acquisition?
Yeah, it was right
2018-ish.
before.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, makes sense. Places like the Crack Shack just fit that box. So,
yeah, it does.
Well, last couple of questions, and we'll wrap this up, Andrew. Just in terms of what's next for you guys at Savory? What's the next 5 to 10 years look like for you at Savory, and then just personally, kind of what's your goal?
Yeah, it's a good question because I'm like right in the middle of it right now as far as figuring it out because, every time you raise a fund, you're making a 10 to 12 year commitment, right? They're 10 to 12 year tails. And I hate making commitments that I can't fulfill on. I don't want to make a commitment and say, well, in 5 years, I'm going to start taking a little bit of a step back and then I'll let someone else take care of the last 5 to 7 years of my commitments. It's just not how I'm going to be.
Sure.
So, for Sean and I, we like the idea of creating jobs. We had added 6,000 employees last year. We'll add 11,000 employees this year. And it's not just frontline workers. It's senior level management. It's, area directors. It's a lot of work, right? But there's so much excitement around that for her and I, because that's what drives us, creating a really good, wholesome workplace, someone that can have, a career that gives them the opportunity to support their families better. There's really, really good paying jobs in this industry. People wouldn't understand that, but so you get into management and senior management, some of the best pay I've seen. So we like creating, and that's what we want to do and continue to do with Savory for the next decade. We'll raise a Fund 3, and Fund 3 was probably going to be most likely my last. And when I say my last, it would be my last as the lead managing director, GP. And I'm really going to be focusing the next several years on building the team around me that I have to be the ones that I turn it over to. I'd like to see that. I think that this is a 100-year firm. It is, because there's always going to be that next concept that's super cool that we all like, that deserves a 20, 30-year run, of growth. And there's the old dilapidated brands that have been around 50, 60, 70 years that are kind of falling off now, right? You start seeing them, like, I remember going there when I was a kid, but I don't go there anymore. And, that's the life cycle of some brands. And I don't think McDonald's is that brand, and I don't think it ever will be. But at the same time, there are brands always that are falling off and new ones that are catching on. So I think that will always exist. But I think the next fund we're going to be pushing out the end of this year, we'll buy another 6, 7 brands. We'll add hundreds of restaurants over the next few years. I mean, we have a lot of growth right now with each of the brands. They have 5 to 15 restaurants opening up in a year. And so you add that up with a portfolio of 12, 15 brands, it's a lot of growth.
Yeah.
And we'll go through several sales. We have a couple brands right now that are going through the sale process. So that's yet to be heard of, but it's coming. And we'll see a lot of these founders reach their dreams of hitting the legacy they wanted to create and creating wealth for their families and their posterity. That's really what we wanted to do in the first place, and that's what we're going to do.
It's amazing. Well, last question, Andrew, just kind of backing up a little bit, thinking about life, when you think about the buckets that exists, wealth, family, job, etc. It's a question I ask most of my guests, is just talk about success and how you define it in your life. How does Andrew Smith define success?
It's a great question, because I've gone through the waves in my career. I've been an entrepreneur for 26 years, started young. I know that was a unique environment for me to be in early on in my career and to have that opportunity presented. And I'm glad that I took the dive into it. But I think about who I was as an entrepreneur when I was younger and then what I am today. And I think everybody's going to go through different chapters on their entrepreneurial journey. But in my 20s, I was a lot more gangbuster for wealth creation and hitting the jackpot and building something fast and having the limelight. And, I think that I've changed that perspective definitely in my 40s as well, as I'm 48 now, that it just is so anticlimactic. Success is anticlimactic if it's all about money. I remember, always having this drive to buy my first Ferrari, right? And I'm going to buy my first Ferrari. When I do that, the ultimate goal will have been achieved, right? And I remember getting my first check that was big enough for me to go buy, my first Ferrari. And I remember getting in this 360 Modena Ferrari, and it was red and tan leather interior with the gate shifting lever in my hand, and driving down the road the first day when I bought that. I'm like, I have accomplished all goals. This is the best day of my life. I'm the next Mark Zuckerberg, even though he didn't exist yet. So in my mind, I just think that, this is the pinnacle, right? And I can't be stopped, and I'm so successful. I'm all that. And then the next day I got in, and I was like, this is super cool. And the third day I got in, and it's like, it's pretty cool. And about a week later, I'm like, still fine, but not as cool. And a month later, I'm like, it's just a car. And it was surprising to me how fast that wore off. The journey for it was much more exciting and fun than actually owning it. And I know it's easy for me to say now because I have had that experience, right? And those that are still pushing for that experience, it's still fun. I'm not saying it's not fun. It was just anticlimactic. And then I work really, really hard, and then I make another check, or I hit another level in my life. And I'm like, it was amazing. And then a couple days later, like, and now what? And then you go through the cycles of success where you buy multiple houses and you buy multiple cars and you fly first class everywhere and you stay in nicer hotels and then you're just like, I just doesn't do it for me. So then you sell all of it because it's just a lot of work to maintain it. And then you kind of realize, boy, what is the drive for this whole success thing? And I've realized that it can't be money. It cannot be money driven, because I just think it's so hollow, anticlimactic. For me, for Shauna and others that I know work around me, it is the pursuit to create something that will go well beyond your years and then be turned over to the people that are around you that also want to be able to create something for themselves. And so for me, success right now is about job creation, about taking people's dream and creating that reality for them. That's really my drive. Now, does that mean that I don't have any drive for any more financial levels in my life? No, I think it's still healthy to have those as a level or as a goal. And when you accomplish it, what are you going to do with it is probably what is more important. And for me, it's more make sure my boys and my grandkids are going to be taken care of, and then make sure that my charitable endeavors are going to be fulfilled, and make sure I do more good in the world with that, because I think it's a mandate. It's a responsibility once you make it. So success for me, do it for another reason than money. If not, you'll be blinded. There was one thing I got from, I would say not a mentor, but a friend of mine in Chicago, and he was the president of this really cool company, Chase. It was called Sears and Roebuck. It was before Amazon took them out.
Yeah.
But Jim gave me this picture, and I don't know if you've seen it before, but it's a picture of a businessman in a suit coat with a tie, and then he's got a bowler cap on, but he's got a green apple in his face.
Okay.
Right?
I
think you've seen
that.
it.
I think I've seen it.
And the painting was painted by this painter, Rene Magritte. And I'm not this huge artist follower or anything. I don't collect art. But this one piece that he gave me has been in my office forever, since he gave it to me, for 2 decades. And he said to me, what is the apple? What does the apple represent in front of that businessman's face? And I'm just like, well, I don't know what it represents, but it's blinding his eyes. So obviously he can't see past the apple. And he goes, right. The apple is what you are focusing too hard on, whether it be money, greed, fame, fortune, envy, whatever it could be. If you focus too hard on it, you're going to blind yourself from all the great things in the world that are beyond the apple. So don't focus too hard on the apple. For some reason, it's always just stuck with me. And I always tell entrepreneurs that, and I tell everybody that, don't focus too hard on that apple, because it'll blind you and it'll make you not a great person. So I think my goal for the next 10 years of my life is to teach others that, and then also to not focus too much on that apple.
I love it, Andrew. Yeah, no better way to end. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time. This has been incredibly valuable, so appreciate it.
Yeah, it was fun.